Welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're going to get into something we haven't really talked about too much, which is the cost of IoT deployments.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of deep dives in the past about the what and the how of the Internet of Things, but
Right.
today we're going to focus more on the money side of things.
Yeah, and for this one, we're going to be looking at some articles from ThingRex.com.
Okay,
So huge shout out to them for all this awesome information.
and this is actually part 4 in our series.
Okay.
So we're going to kind of assume that you've listened to the other episodes in the series already.
Right.
And that you have a little bit of a base understanding of the Internet of Things. If you don't, definitely go back and check out those other episodes first.
Yeah.
But today we're going to look specifically at AWS IoT and try to demystify all those costs that can come along with it.
Sounds good.
All right, so to get us started here, I have a question for you. Can you really get free IoT devices?
Well, you see all these offers out there that say free, but it really makes you wonder because there's no such thing as a free lunch, right?
Yeah.
Even if you do get the device for free, there's still going to be ongoing costs that you have to account for.
So what are some of those costs that people might not realize?
It's kind of like when you buy a car, right?
Okay.
You pay for the car itself, but then you've got all these other things like insurance and gas and
Yeah.
maintenance and all that. So with IoT, you've got similar things like connectivity,
Okay.
data processing, storage, even the people you need to manage and maintain the system.
So you're really saying that it's not just about the device itself.
Exactly.
It's about the total cost of ownership
Right.
over the entire lifespan of your deployment.
Exactly.
Now, one thing that we hear a lot is that the simplest setup is always the cheapest.
Yeah.
Is that actually true?
Well, not necessarily.
Yeah.
There's an article on ThingRex that talks about this.
Okay.
They had this company with 100 devices
Okay.
sending data to AWS every 5 seconds.
Ah.
They thought the easiest way would be just to send it straight to an S3 bucket.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Right. But what they didn't realize is that each one of those data transfers triggers an API call, and those API calls actually cost money.
Oh, interesting.
So even though it seems simple on the surface, those little charges were really adding up.
So what do they do to bring those costs down?
Well, they ended up using something called Kinesis Data Firehose.
Kinesis Data Firehose.
Yeah, it's basically a buffer.
Right.
So instead of sending all those individual API calls, they could bundle them together.
Ah.
And that way they were making fewer calls overall and saving a ton of money.
So it's kind of like instead of taking your own car every time you go somewhere,
Yeah,
you decide to take the bus and split the cost with other people.
exactly. It's like carpooling for your data.
Makes sense. So the takeaway here is that the simplest solution isn't always the best.
Right, you have to look at the bigger picture.
Okay, now I know you mentioned that collaboration between the business side and the technical side is super important.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, ThingRex has another article that goes into this,
Okay.
and they talk about how the business goals and the technical solutions really need to work hand in hand.
Okay.
Like, for example, there was this company that was sending data from their IoT devices every single minute.
Every minute.
Yes, they were trying to generate these personalized recommendations for their users.
Okay. Interesting.
But when they actually sat down and thought about it, they realized they could achieve the same results
Right.
if they just sent the data every 5 minutes instead.
So just by tweaking that one little thing,
Yeah,
they were able to save a bunch of money.
exactly. And not only that, but they were also transferring less data overall,
Right.
which meant less processing, less storage.
Less everything.
Right. And it even helped improve the battery life of their devices.
Wow. So it really was a win-win situation.
Yeah, a small change can make a big difference.
So it sounds like it's all about finding that sweet spot where you can meet your business needs
Exactly.
without going overboard on the technical side.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about hidden costs. Now I want to get into the nitty-gritty of AWS pricing.
Okay, let's do it.
What are some of the key things that people need to know?
Well, first of all, you need to understand that AWS uses a pay-as-you-go model. So you only pay for what you actually use.
Okay.
So it's kind of like your electricity bill.
Okay.
The more you use, the more you pay.
Makes sense.
And this is actually a great thing for businesses, especially if they're just starting out,
Right.
because it means they can scale up or down as needed.
So let's talk about some of the specific services that are involved in an IoT deployment.
Okay.
We've already touched on Kinesis Data Firehose.
Right.
But what about AWS IoT Core? What are the main things that are going to drive costs there?
So with AWS IoT Core, there are a few key things that contribute to the cost. First of all, you have to pay to connect your devices to the platform.
Okay, so a connection fee.
Right. It's a small fee per device,
Right.
but if you have a lot of devices, it can add up.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, what else?
Then you have the rules engine.
The rules engine.
Yeah, it lets you define actions that are triggered when certain events occur. Like if a sensor reading goes above a certain threshold, you can set it to send an alert.
So it's all about automation.
Exactly.
But you said there's a cost associated with that.
Yeah, you get charged each time a rule is evaluated. So it's important to design your rules carefully
I see.
so that you're not wasting money on unnecessary evaluations.
So again, it's about finding that balance
Right.
between the power of automation and keeping costs in check.
Exactly. And of course, you also have to pay for storing all that data.
Oh, right. All those
Yeah.
data coming in from the devices.
Yeah, we talked about S3,
Mm-hmm.
but there are actually other storage options within AWS as well, and they each have their own pricing structure.
So you might choose a different option,
Right.
depending on what kind of data you're dealing with and what your needs are.
Exactly. It all depends on the specifics of your situation.
So I'm getting the sense that AWS pricing can be pretty complex.
Yeah, it can be.
So for businesses that are trying to navigate all of this and optimize their costs, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think the most important thing is to really understand your business goals first.
Okay.
Like, what problem are you trying to solve with your IoT solution?
Right.
And what value are you hoping to create?
Because without that clear vision,
Right.
you might end up spending money on things you don't really need.
Exactly. And once you have a good grasp of your goals, don't be afraid to experiment and iterate. You can try things out, see what works best,
Right.
without having to spend any money up front.
So it's kind of like taking a car for a test drive.
Yeah, exactly.
Before you commit to buying it.
Right. And it's also important to remember that cost optimization is an ongoing process. It's not something you do once and then forget about it.
Right.
You need to keep monitoring your usage,
Uh-huh.
analyze your costs, and make adjustments as you go.
So what are some of the tools or resources that AWS offers?
Well, they have things like Cost Explorer.
Cost Explorer.
Yeah, and budgets.
Okay.
These can give you insights into your spending patterns
Okay.
and help you figure out where you might be able to save some money.
So they're like your financial advisors for your IoT deployment.
Right.
Now, we've been talking a lot about AWS specifically,
Yeah.
but I assume these principles apply more broadly.
Oh, absolutely.
So whether you're using AWS or Azure or Google Cloud,
Right.
cost optimization is always going to be a key consideration.
Definitely.
So you need to understand the pricing model.
Yeah.
Think carefully about your architecture
Yeah.
and constantly monitor and adjust your usage.
Exactly. It's all about being smart and strategic.
We've covered a lot of the theoretical stuff.
Right.
Now I want to see how this plays out in the real world.
There's this one company, a big agricultural company, that used IoT to totally change how they do irrigation.
Okay, agriculture and IoT, now we're talking. Tell me more.
So they started by putting sensors all over their fields
Okay.
to collect real-time data on stuff like soil moisture, temperature, even crop health.
So they're not just watering on a set schedule anymore.
Right, they can be way more precise about it.
I see.
And they connected all these sensors to AWS IoT Core.
Okay.
So they could analyze the data and figure out exactly how much water each area needed.
So they're using less water overall.
Exactly, which obviously saves them a lot of money.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hold on, you said there's another interesting part to this.
Oh, yeah, they also used edge computing.
Edge computing. Everyone's talking about edge computing these days, but what does it actually mean in this case?
Basically, it means processing some of the data right there on the devices
Okay.
instead of sending everything back to the cloud.
Ah.
So in
yeah,
this case, they were able to do some of that initial data analysis
Okay.
right there on the sensor devices.
And that way they're sending less data to the cloud,
Exactly.
which means they're saving money on data transfer
Right.
and cloud computing costs as well.
Exactly. It's a really smart way to do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got smart irrigation and edge computing working together.
Uh-huh.
What other cost optimization strategies are out there?
Oh, there are tons. Another cool example is this manufacturing company that used machine learning to predict equipment failures.
Predictive maintenance.
Yeah. They were able to collect all this data
Yeah.
from sensors on their factory equipment,
Okay.
and they fed it into a machine learning model
Okay.
running on AWS.
Gotcha.
And this let them identify potential problems
Okay.
before they actually became big breakdowns.
So no more unplanned downtime,
Right.
which means no more super expensive repairs.
Exactly. It's a huge win for them.
So it all goes back to what we were talking about before,
Uh-huh.
about understanding your business goals
Yeah.
and making sure your technical solutions are aligned with those goals.
Exactly. They knew that downtime was costing them a ton of money.
Right.
So they invested in a solution that would help them prevent that. And the best part is they didn't even have to build their own machine learning models.
Oh, really?
Nope. AWS has all these pre-built services that make it super easy.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about those hidden costs of IoT deployments,
We have.
debunked some common myths, and laid out a framework for cost optimization.
Right.
We even got to hear some inspiring real-world success stories.
Yeah. So what's the final message you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the biggest takeaway here is that you shouldn't let those cost concerns hold you back from exploring the incredible potential of IoT.
Absolutely.
Armed with the knowledge we've discussed today,
Right.
you can confidently navigate those financial challenges and build solutions that truly deliver value for your business.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, that's it for this deep dive on the cost of IoT deployments. Hope you all enjoyed it and learned a few things along the way. We'll catch you next time.
Until then, happy connecting.